Hello, today's tutorial is on the Juliet handbag. The Juliet handbag is a very structured and elegant handbag. The best feature of this handbag is the handles. These handles are from Bringberry Hardware in Canada. However, I have gotten permission to sell these handles in my shop as well as part of a Juliet handbag kit. So I will have them available for you in my shop, which makes me really happy. This handbag pattern has a few pieces of hardware that are not as common, so that's why I'm going to have a kit available for you. First, of course, the handles, and then I use these strap connectors here, which are just mini strap connectors, and I'll have those available on my site as well. Other hardware that you will need is a chain, but that will also be available in the kit. And then I use a zipper cord end to tie off the end of my zipper. You can tie it off however you want, but these will also be, all of this hardware will be available for you in my shop. The structure of this handbag is due to the foam that you're going to use on these exterior panels and on your gusset. Because of the structure, this is made with raw edges, so you're going to have a binding around the outside, which I think ties the handbag pattern together nicely. If you don't like binding, don't be afraid of this. It's okay. It's actually really easy to put together. Everything else is pretty. Here's the inside. You have zipper panels, and then you are also going to have an interior zipper pocket. So, get your pattern, get your hardware and your pieces cut, and join me for this tutorial. Here are our pieces for the Juliet handbag. There's quite a few of them for this one. Follow the cutting instructions on page 3. Depending on your fabric that you're using, will depend a little bit on what type of interfacing you're going to need. I'm going to show you a quick trick for the interfacing for template C for the lower lining here in just a minute. But everything else, just follow the cutting instructions. You will have a few pieces that you'll need to cut out in foam and a few that you will need to cut out in some firm interfacing. That is all in your cutting instructions. And then we will get started. A small tip on cutting out your template C lower lining. I like to go ahead and put down a large strip of interfacing on top of my lining fabric, and then trace my template onto the interfacing and fabric together. This way you're not trying to cut your lining fabric, not trying to cut your interfacing fabric, and then trying to get them to all match up. I find it a lot simpler to go ahead and just put down the interfacing and then just cut it all as one piece. Well, two pieces, but as one piece. The interfacing, I just use the width of my SF 101, which is about 20 inches by about 7 inches, and then you can fit 2 template C's on there and cut everything at once. The first thing we're going to do is do our exterior panel prep. You're going to want your 2 exterior panels, your upper stabilizers, and your lower stabilizers. Go ahead and flip your panels over to the wrong side, and you're going to want to mark your centers, top and bottom. We are going to glue down our upper stabilizer. I like to use Fabric Tack by Beacon for my glue. It dries very quickly. It works well on the cork leather that I use. And you're going to match up your centers, but more importantly, you want to match up this curve here. And give that a good press down. Now, you're going to have extra, or your upper stabilizer is going to be a little smaller on the sides than your exterior panel. That will help for the seam allowance later. All right, once you have that down, go ahead and grab a lower stabilizer, and we're going to glue it down, and you want to match up your centers with both the upper stabilizer and your bottom. I like to put a good amount of glue on these because you're really not going to be sewing this. It's not going to have any stitches in it. It will be held in once everything's sewn together, but just so it doesn't slip or wrinkle down the line, I like to make sure I have plenty of glue to keep it in place. Now you're going to abut the lower stabilizer right up against the upper stabilizer and make sure your centers match. Give that a good press, and we're going to do the same thing with the other exterior panel. Okay, now we have both exterior panels and the stabilizers attached. We're going to set these off to the side, let them dry until we need them later on. Next, we're going to move on to our gusset assembly. You will need your exterior gusset lining, your interior gusset lining, and your interior, or your gusset stabilizer. Go ahead and mark the centers on all three of your pieces on the long sides, and then we're going to put the right sides together with the exterior and interior gusset, and I want you to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance down both short ends. All right, we're going to sew with a 1/2 inch seam allowance down both ends of our gusset. Now that we have our ends sewn together, we're going to flip our pieces so that the wrong sides are together. And if your material allows, go ahead and press that seam. If you're working with material that doesn't press, you can just add a clip or two. To get that seam flat. And now we're going to top stitch at our seam 1/8 of an inch from the edge. We have our gusset exterior and interior together now, and what we need to do next is put in our gusset stabilizer. Again, we're going to glue this down. And again, this is going to be out of the seam allowance, so it's not going to be stitched. It should be held in fairly well once everything is together, but I like to put a good amount of glue on there so that it doesn't move around. Okay. what we're going to do is we're going to kind of open up our lining and our exterior. I might actually just flip this out so you can see a little bit better in the video. You're going to line up your middle, your center marks, and you want to center your stabilizer between the between the edges of your gusset. The end of your gusset should come right up against your seam allowance here. And on this other side as well. Okay, so I'm going to flip this back around so it lies flat and I can give it a good press. You can allow that to dry for a few minutes if you need to. I'm pretty good about this fabric tack keeping it in place. Our next step is going to be to baste along these long edges your interior and exterior gussets together to sandwich that stabilizer in between. To baste the sides together, you're going to want to use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. While this is just a basting stitch, it's nice to get it fairly accurate on these because when you're sewing your gusset to your exterior panels, you can use the baste stitch kind of as a guide. Now that you have it basted together, set it aside, let the glue dry completely, and we'll move on to our next step. We are now ready for our zipper panel assembly. You're going to need your exterior zipper panels, your lining zipper panels, and then your exterior zipper. I have already taken the end of my zipper and done a 90-degree angle, but you're going to want to do that. And next, we're going to look at our exterior zipper panels. Go ahead and orientate them in the way that you want your zipper to lay between them. This isn't really important for my solid cork that I'm using, but if you're using a print and you want it to go a certain direction, if you want your prints to meet a certain way, you're going to want to orientate your zipper panels like you want to see them, okay? Now, on the inside edges here that are going to meet your zipper, you're going to measure down the top distance that I have in the pattern and go ahead and place a mark. And then on the inside edges again, you're going to measure up the bottom distance so that they are mirrors of each other. Once you get those edges marked, go ahead and separate your zipper if you're using zipper tape, and keep it in that orientation that you want it. And move the left hand side zippers off to the side. So we're going to be working with our right hand zippers. Take your zipper side and put it right sides together with your exterior zipper panel, and you want your zipper edge to meet right up with that mark that you made for the beginning of the zipper. That's going to be the smaller of the measurements that you made. And go ahead and clip your zipper in place. Now, once you get down to your second mark here, This is where you're going to start tapering your zipper. So just pull your zipper down and go ahead using another clip to hold that edge in place. Now, I don't baste my zipper sides together separately. I just do it all as one big sandwich. If you like to baste your zipper in place before you put on your lining, go ahead and baste it now. If not, grab one of your lining pieces. Again, if you have your lining pieces a certain orientation that you want, put them in that orientation, which with the top of the zipper at your top, and then grab the right hand side one. And put it on. For this design, you are not really going to see the lining as much, so don't worry too much about its orientation. Now here, when you get to your clip that's holding on where you begin your taper, make sure you hold your zipper in place before you move that clip. All right, we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew our zipper on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. What we're actually going to do is we're going to start here in one corner. We're going to sew across the top and then down to this other corner, leaving this bottom edge open. I suggest starting in the corner that's going to go over the non-tapered edge first. That way you have your zipper sewn down before you try to move this tail out of the way, because you don't want to sew over your tail. You're going to want to move that over out of the way before you sew down this side. So I'm going to start at this corner over here, since that is where the start of my zipper is going to be. And you're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now before I start sewing down this next side, I'm going to unclip my zipper tail and I'm going to tuck it out of the way. We have our zipper panels sewn together. Next thing we want to do is we're going to clip our corners here. And we're going to flip this wrong sides together. Go ahead and get one of your turning tools if you need to help get the corners popped out nicely. I don't have my turning tool over here, so I'm going to do it carefully. Whoops! Carefully with my stiletto here, which didn't turn out too careful for that corner. So see if I can do it better for this one. There we go. So pull that nice and flat. If you have material that you can iron, go press that nice and flat. If not, just use some clips to kind of help hold it in place. And you see our tail here. Our zipper tail is nicely tapered before it gets to the edge. All right, now that you have that turned, we're going to go back to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch down the side, across the top, and down the other side. Again, still leaving this bottom edge open. We have our right side zipper panel complete and top stitched. Now we're going to do the same thing we just did with our left side zipper panel. And this time your zipper is going to go the opposite direction from how you sewed this one. And we'll just clip it on and sew it the exact same way. Now we have a left zipper panel to match our right zipper panel. Set those to the side and we'll sew those onto our interior panels in a few steps. We are now ready for the interior zipper pocket assembly. You're going to need one of your lower linings, your zipper pocket and your zipper facing, as well as your interior zipper. I like to use a number 3 zipper if I have the color I want. For my interior zipper, but you can use a number 5 without it being a problem. It's going to be the same measurements, same steps, everything. First thing, you want to mark your centers on your lower lining, and then we're going to draw our zipper box, which I've already drawn. You're going to measure down 1.5 inches from the top. That's where the top of your zipper box is going to be, and you're going to go ahead and draw your zipper box on the wrong side of your lower lining. Once your zipper box is drawn on there, go ahead and flip it back to the right side, and you're going to take your zipper facing. I like to just fold it in half and make a little crease to know where the middle is. And you're going to line that up with the middle of your lower lining, and you're going to measure down the amount that's in the pattern for your zipper facing. And then, sorry, hold on. I forgot to grab my pins. Go ahead and pin these edges in place. Now kind of double check that your zipper facing is about in the middle of where your zipper box is going to be. And then we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to stitch around where we've marked our zipper box. Once you have your zipper box sewn, we're going to draw in the lines that we're going to cut the zipper box open with. So go ahead and get your ruler, and you're going to measure up 1/4 inch from the bottom of your zipper box, and you're going to draw a line down the center length of your zipper box. Go ahead and stop and start that line 1/2 inch from the ends of your zipper box. Okay, now that you have your center line drawn on there, you're going to want to draw a diagonal line up to the corner of your zipper box. Now you can use your ruler if you want to get exact on there, or you can just eyeball it. We're going to have this little triangle to help turn the zipper facing to the wrong side. Okay, so go ahead, get your scissors. I like to use my rotary cutter to cut this center line, just makes it a little easier. And then I get some small snips to cut my diagonal lines. And you want to get as close to your stitching on these diagonal lines without actually cutting your stitches. Make very sure not to cut your stitches. I'm going to do that off camera and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've cut open my zipper box. You can see I got as close to those corners without cutting through my stitching. And now for the fun part, we're going to flip our zipper facing to the other side. So I like to kind of get this seam just finger pressed down all the way around the zipper box. And then I flip over and I do the same thing here. I just kind of finger press this open on the wrong side just to get us started so it'll lay a little flatter. Get my little triangles opened up. And then you're just going to push your zipper facing through to the wrong side of your lower lining. All right, so you're going to need to go over to your ironing board and give this a really good press so that it stays where it's supposed to, which I will go do in a minute, but just so you can get the idea. You're gonna have it flip to the other side and you're gonna have this nice zipper box in your lower lining. So I'm gonna go over to my ironing board. I'm gonna give this a good press. If once you've pressed it, it's still a little wonky and it doesn't want to stay in place, you can use some double-sided tape here on the back side to help kind of stick it down and hold it in place. And then we'll get started putting our pocket on. There we go. We have our zipper box nice and pressed. Our zipper facing is flat against the wrong side of our lower lining. And now we're going to move on to making the zipper pocket. Go ahead and get your zipper pocket and your zipper, interior zipper. And you're going to line up your zipper with the wrong side against the right side of your zipper pocket. And just line that across the top, clip it in place. And we'll go over to the sewing machine and we're going to base stitch the zipper down to the top of the pocket. Now that we have the first side basted on, what we're going to do is we're going to rotate our pocket around. We're going to take our zipper and we're going to pull it up to the opposite end of our zipper pocket. And this is what will create our pocket. Go ahead and clip that in place, lining up the edge of your zipper with the edge of the pocket. Go back over to the machine and we're going to baste the other side. Once both sides of the zipper are basted in place, I put on the zipper pull. I find it easier to baste the zipper tape, if you're using that, to the pocket without a zipper pull on it, just so you don't have to worry about moving it out of your way. So if you don't have your zipper pull on, make sure you do that before we move on to the next step. And now what we need to do is we need to put double-sided tape along both edges of the zipper. So go ahead and get your lower lining again, and we're going to take off just one side first. I usually do the top side first. And we're going to line up our zipper inside our zipper box. I feel the edges here just to see, make sure I'm where I need to be left to right, and then I move around, woo, top to bottom to get that zipper nicely centered in our zipper box. Once you have it where you want, give the top a good press. Mine's a little crooked over here. There we go. And then just remove that other piece of tape. Or the backing from the other piece of tape. Double check everything's where you want it to be. Give everything a good press. Now, once you're at this point, we're going to sew the zipper to the zipper box, but our pocket is already on there, so we don't want to sew our pocket down. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our pocket and we're going to flip it up to the top of our lower lining. Here it is from the back side. You want to make sure the entire pocket is pulled up and out of the way. And we're going to first sew just across the bottom of our zipper box. You want to stop, or you want to start about one stitch before, or ahead of the end of your zipper box, and you want to end about one stitch past the end of your zipper box. Leave long tails, pull them through, tie them off on the other side for a neater finish. And we're just going to stitch right along just the bottom of our zipper box. All right, so remember we want to leave our tails long. We don't want to back stitch. And we're going to start a stitch before the end of our zipper box, and we're going to do a stitch after the end of our zipper box. So we've sewn across the bottom of our zipper box. It's a little hard to see since I'm not using contrasting thread, but you see I started just a stitch on this side of the zipper box and I ended one stitch to the other side of the zipper box. So I'm going to pull through my tails here and tie them off. Okay, so once your tails are tied off, I want you to take your zipper pocket and fold it back down. Again, make sure that all of the pocket is pulled down so you don't stitch your pocket together. And then if you want, you can place a pin just to hold your pocket down and in place so it doesn't move on you. All right, now we're going to start where our last stitch ended, and we're going to stitch up and around our zipper box on the other three sides, ending where your first stitch began. So you're going to start at this stitch and you're going to end at this stitch. We have the rest of our stitching around our zipper box. I've already pulled through my long ends and tied them off. So now our zipper is all sewn in. Our next step is to go ahead and close our pocket. So what you want to do is you want to fold back your edge and you're going to sew down the side of your pocket on each side. Now that we have our interior zipper pocket complete, we are going to move on to the interior panel assembly. You are going to want your two upper linings. You're going to want both lower linings, the one with the zipper and the one without. And you're going to want your assembled zipper panels. To begin, to go ahead and make sure all your pieces have their centers marked. And we're going to begin with our lower lining that has the zipper and our right hand zipper panel. We want to place our zipper panel so the lining side of the zipper panel is against the right side of the lower lining. And we're going to match our centers. We're going to line up the zipper panel along the top edge of our lower lining. Now for this one, you might get a slight bit of skewing due to your zipper box. So I'll show you when I flip this one over. You'll see my middle isn't quite lined up, but my edges are. Your seam allowance will be large enough that if you have a little bit of bowing because of your zipper box in your panel, that will be just fine. just get that zipper on there straight along the top. Okay, so you have your zipper panel and your lower lining. Now you're going to grab one of your upper linings. It doesn't matter which one. And you're going to place that right side together with your lower lining so that the exterior fabric meets the exterior fabric of your zipper panel. And once again, you're going to line up those center marks. And go ahead and clip across this long edge. We're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch just across this top straight edge of our panels. We have the lower lining and the upper lining sewn together with our zipper panel. I want you to take your upper lining and flip it up so that the seam is against your upper lining. So just flip that straight up with your zipper panel going down and your upper lining going up. Again, if you have fabric that you can press, you can go ahead and press that seam open. If not, just add a couple clips to hold it in place. And we're going to go back to the sewing machine again and we're going to top stitch our upper lining down. All right, we have everything put together and top stitched. You'll see we have a little extra from our seam allowance overhanging here. So what you want to do is you just want to trim that so that it matches the edge of that upper lining. And there we have one interior panel finished. We're going to do the exact same thing with our second interior panel. With the left hand zipper, we're going to match that up, lining side of the panel, of the zipper panel to the right side of the lining, and the upper panel there. Stitch across, top stitch, and we will have both panels completed. Your interior panels are now complete, so we're going to move on to the panel and gusset assembly. You're going to want your assembled interior panels. You want your prepped exterior panels with the stabilizer on, and you want your assembled gusset. What we're going to do first is get our exterior and our interior panels together. So if you have an exterior panel that you want to be your front panel, go ahead and get that one now. And use your interior panel that has the left-hand zipper or that does not have the zipper pocket on it. You're going to place these panels wrong sides together, lining up this central curve. I like to use a little bit of glue on my upper portion here that has the firm stabilizer. I don't put any glue down on the lower portion. Again, we're just gonna line up our panels. If you're using glue, give it a good press, and then make sure your bottoms, lower portion are even. If you want to clip it in place, especially if you don't have any glue on there, put a couple clips around. And then we're going to go and we're going to do a base stitch again, just like we did on the gusset. Make sure you don't stitch your zipper tail. I'm actually going to put a clip to keep it out of the way. We're going to start up at our top corner here on the outside, stitch all the way around the body of the panel, back up to our outer corner on the other side. We're going to use 1/8 of an inch basting stitch, seam allowance again. Again, just like with the gusset, even though it's a basting stitch, it's kind of nice to get it accurate for your measurement, because when we put the gusset with our panels, we can use that basting stitch to help guide around. The front panel is now basted together with the interior and the exterior together. We're going to do the same thing with the other panel. This one has the zipper pocket on the interior, and this will be our back panel. With both of your panels now basted together, we're going to move on to attaching the gusset. Set one of them to the side. It doesn't matter which one you start with. I'm going to be starting with the front panel. And you want to get your gusset. And you're going to turn your gusset so that the lining side of the gusset is against the lining side of your panel. This is going to have a raw edge. We're not, and the raw edge is going to be on the exterior of the bag because we're going to bind the exterior. So go ahead and find your center marks. The first thing you want to do is line up your center mark of your panel and your gusset. And you can see I have lots of clips here because you cannot go wrong in using clips when putting on a gusset. Go ahead and clip across the bottom portion of the gusset and the panel. And then you're going to one side, go ahead and curve it around. And I like to go ahead and match up the top of my gusset and you want the top of the gusset to match right where the upper lining and the lower lining meet. And go ahead and clip that in place. Now just clip around this side, getting that curve where you need it. This curve is subtle enough that you do not need to clip into the curve. You're also going to be doing a small enough seam allowance that it makes the curve quite easy. So I would suggest not clipping your curve. All right, so we got that all clipped in. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Go ahead and curve your gusset around. Put it where you want it to be. Edge of your gusset meeting that bottom portion of your upper lining. Clip that in place. And then go ahead and clip down the side and around the curve on this side of the gusset. Okay, so there we are. We have our gusset all clipped in place. We're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew our gusset to our panel with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I know that sounds small, but when we sew the binding on, we're going to sew with a larger seam allowance, so that will hide our stitching that we're doing now, and also with the binding it will give a larger stitch so everything gets held together well. So go ahead and let's go to the sewing machine. We're going to sew around, go slowly. I like to use a stiletto to keep everything kind of pushed into the right place. The smaller seam allowance makes the curve a little bit easier, but just remember, go slow. Okay, I'm going to show you the first part of this kind of in real-time stitching speed, just so you can get an idea of how slow you actually should go. But then once I get it going, I'm going to speed it up a little bit just for the sake of time for the video. Now, this is where I was talking about if you have a consistent basting stitch, you should be able to use that kind of as a helpful guide onto where you need to go, especially around your corners. But don't use that completely, because if you're a little bit off, it's better to, use your foot for your measurement. You want to make sure you back stitch well here at the top of the gusset. Okay, here we are. The gusset is on. You can see it's sewn on there. Nicely. If you're using a vinyl or a cork, you might have a few, you know, like creases from where you had to kind of twist and bunch, but those will come out as you're going through. We're going to do the same thing. Now we're going to put on the other panel, which for me, this is going to be the back panel. Again, it doesn't matter if you started with the back or the front. It's all going to end up the same. We're going to pin this on or clip this on the exact same way. Find those centers, which can be a little hard if you didn't mark the right side of your lining. But I find I can just move it out of the way fairly well. I don't know if I said this earlier. I like to sew with the gusset side up on both when I put the first panel on and when I put the second panel on. I find it a little bit easier, but you do what is easiest for you. If you find it sewing with the panel up easier and you get more accurate that way, by all means, do what is easiest for you. So we're going to go around, we're going to clip the same way. Go ahead and clip this bottom edge of the panel to the bottom part of the gusset, and then we're going to go around one side and then the other. Okay, we have it all clipped together. We're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew just like we did with the other side with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. This side is slightly more tricky just because you have a little more bulk, but it's the same thing. Just go slowly and use a stiletto to kind of help things stick where they need to stick. Okay, we have our other panel on. We have both panels, the gusset, starting to look good. Guys, that was the hardest part. I know some of you don't like binding, but this binding is really pretty simple, and that is our next step. So let's get started on that. Now we are ready to add the binding to our bag. This is one of the last steps, so we are so close to done. I have you cut your binding at 7/8 of an inch. which is hard to draw a center line down 7/8 of an inch. So instead, what I have you do is draw a line 3/8 of an inch or half an inch, depending on which way you want to do it, from the edge. So you're going to have one side that is 3/8 of an inch and one side that is half an inch. So this line is not actually centered. This is because as you wrap the binding around the bag, you see we have this little bit of a width where our fabric is. As we line up our binding around the edge of the bag, that 1/16 of an inch that we're going to have there is going to account for that width of the edge of the bag, of the raw edge of the bag. So draw your line so that is 3/8 and 1 inch. I'm sorry, 3/8 and a half of an inch on either side of the line. Then you're going to put double-sided tape down the length of the line, down the length of the binding on both sides of the line, which I have already done with my other binding piece over here. We're going to get our assembled bag, and I find it easiest to line the binding up against the flat side of the bag. So I want you to take your binding that has the 3/8 of an inch to the edge first, and pull back the tape just a little bit. I'm sorry, pull back the backing just a little bit, so just a little bit of your tape is exposed. And you're going to start by lining up that line against the edge of your bag. Have a little bit of an overhang here, and just clip it in place along your bag. So you'll see that the two different measurements, when you fold your lining over, because of the width, that just little bit of the width of the edge of the bag is actually going to fold over and meet exactly in half. So there's actually two ways you can do this binding. I'm going to show you this way first, which I recommend as you're first making this bag the first or second time, is going ahead and just going around the entirety of the bag, lining up your edge with the line on your binding, and then going back and folding it over once you have the first of it lined, the first part of it lined up. You can also go and just fold it as you go. I find this to be a little bit easier the first couple times you make it, just so you can make sure you're getting your binding accurately in place. So I'm going to do it this way for this binding side, and then when I do the other side of the binding, I'll show you just folding it over as you go. I also find it easier to pull the backing away gradually, so that way this side down here doesn't get stuck to your table or your hand or your bag, and then you have to pull it away. So you're just going to go around the edge, lining up the raw edge of your bag with that line that you drew on your binding. The corners can be, the curves can be a little tricky, and if there's a few wrinkles, don't worry about it. Once you get the other side folded over, you can get those smoothed out well. All right, so it looks like, I'm not actually short because I know I have some wrinkles in there, but you should have a little bit of overhang, which I don't at this point, but I know that I have these extra wrinkles here around my edge. So as I fold over, this is going to move up and I will have overhang at this edge as well. All right, so once you got that stuck on there, you're gonna do the same thing over here, and you're gonna fold it around. You do want to make sure that your binding is folding in half. So kind of feel with your fingers where you are. Make sure that your fold is going tight against the edge of your bag. And this is where you're going to kind of push those wrinkles around the corners out of the way. So you can kind of already see I'm already getting a little extra as I push the wrinkles out around the corners, which will make sure I have plenty of overhang on the other side. This just takes a little bit of fiddling, a little bit of finessing it around. So don't worry if you're pulling it off and rearranging it in a few spaces. You can see I already got this extra here. Sorry, I'm off camera. This is harder to do trying to stay in camera alignment. So you want to make sure you still, even once you start moving it a little bit, you still want to make sure that line that you drew on your binding is lined up with the edge, because you want it to be nice and even around the edge of your bag. Oops, sorry about that. All right, so you'll see I had quite a bit that had gotten wrinkled up around the corners. So I will have plenty of room for a little bit of overhang here at the top of the bag. Now, if you're feeling a little antsy about making sure you have enough, I really have the binding measurement cut so you aren't going to have a lot of overhang. So if you feel like you want a little more wiggle room, go ahead and add an extra inch to that binding. But you should have plenty, because I have plenty over here. I could have moved that down more if I needed to. Okay. And your handle covers this top edge, so you will be fine. All right, so I'm going to put a couple more clips here, just to kind of keep everything where I want it. Maybe one more down here at the bottom. Okay. Again, I like to sew with the panel side flat down, and we're going to sew this the exact same way we sewed the gusset and the panel together. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance this time, and we're just going to go around slowly, sewing everything together. Okay, so let's head over to the machine. Okay, we have our bindings sewn on. You want to double check, make sure everything is stitched down. Go on your other side. See, I got a little wonky right there. Looks like I wasn't quite even in my folding, but everything is stitched, so it's okay. So you're going to go ahead and trim your overhang even with the top of your bag. Okay. Now we're going to do the same thing with the other binding. So you're going to get your other binding, get the tape on it, and again, I'm going to start with the panel side down, and you want to start with your 3/8 of an inch against your flat panel. Okay, this time I'm going to show you how I just fold it all at once, which you kind of got the gist of when I was going back and having to maneuver it a little bit on the other side. But basically you're going to start the same way. Line up your line that you drew on the binding with the edge of your bag, and then just fold it around as you go. It's going to be kind of hard because I'm going to have to keep moving the other part of the bag out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. But just line up that line and then fold. Okay, so line up that line, stick it, and then fold it over. I would say the hardest part to make sure you're even is right here where the gusset meets everything. So double check there. That's what happened on this other side of my binding was, I didn't quite have it folded evenly over at that portion. So double check where your gusset meets at the top of your gusset, that everything is even there. All right, so we're just going to go around the entirety of the bag, just like this, folding and clipping. Okay, so double check that you have most of your wrinkles out. Smooth where you need to smooth. Put a couple extra clips on if you feel like you need them in specific places. Make sure on these curves you are folded tight against the edge of the bag, because that is where you might have some gapping if you don't double check it. Like there, I can feel that I wasn't quite folded completely against the edge of the bag. All right, so that's how you can go around and do it with just folding instead of clipping and then clipping a second time. Try it both ways, whatever you think is easier for you. And make sure you have overhang on each side. Then we'll go over to the sewing machine and we'll stitch around just like we did with the other side of the binding. Okay, we got our second side binding on. Looks good. Everything's caught. We didn't miss anything. Again, got a little close on that edge, so be careful on those edges where the gusset meets. Go ahead and trim off the overhang, even with the top of the bag. There we go. And now all we have left are our finishing touches, which are going to be adding the handle, adding the connectors, and getting our zipper finished. All right, we're ready to put on our finishing touches and add the hardware to our Juliet handbag. Remember, I have a link in the description below for hardware kits that you can get from my website. And then I also have the link for just the handles that I get from Bringberry Hardware. That is also in the description below. First thing we're going to do is start with our strap connectors. The measurements are in the pattern for these strap connectors. So you want to measure down and put both of the measurements, just add a dot, and we're going to punch those and add our strap connector. And of course I need to get my leather punch and my screwdrivers because I forgot to bring them over. Okay, now I have all my supplies. I went ahead and measured down for my strap connectors. I'm going to take my leather punch and punch through where I have those marks. You'll notice I'm using a fairly large hole. That is because these strap connectors are going to have to go through that foam that we put in the gusset. So we want to make sure that these screw settings can fit through there. So you want to punch a fairly large hole. I think mine is set at the 3.5 millimeter mark. All right, so go ahead. My fabric is still attached, so let me get that out of the way. Okay, and we're going to add our strap connector right on to there, and we're going to add the back plate. And get that screwed together. See if I can do this without losing my screws and without totally blocking the view for you guys, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. So go ahead and get those strap connectors screwed in on each side, and then we'll look at the next hardware step. Okay, so I got the strap connectors screwed on both sides. You'll see the plates there on the inside. The next thing we're going to want to do is to add our zipper pull to our zippers. So I still have those clipped from where I sewed them. So go ahead and add your zipper pull. To your zipper panel. And then we are going to add our zipper cord end. If you want to use something different that's not the zipper cord end, and you want to do a zipper tab or anything like that, feel free to do so. I like the way the zipper cord end looks with this handbag, since this is a little bit fancier of a bag style. Oh, don't want to lose that. Let's try that again. Okay. All right, so there's your zipper cord end. Let's tuck that away. And the final thing we need to add are our beautiful handles. So these are semicircle grommet handles. You will want to unscrew the back from the handle. This still has the protective film over the top of it so it doesn't get scratched. I'm going to try to leave that on as I do this, just so I can keep these handles from getting dinged up, as I'm sure I will be bumping and everything around, trying to keep everything in camera line. These, I will say, they come with a couple screws holding the back panel on, and the screws that are holding them in are just, I like to call them shipping screws. So these are not the screws that you're going to use for the final assembly. There'll be another set of screws in with your handles that you'll want to use. They are a little bit shorter than, let me get these set so you can see them. So these over here are what come when the handle is shipped. They're going to be a little bit longer. These are going to be too long to get a tight hold for the handle against the bag. So you want to use the other set of screws that's going to come with it. They're a little bit shorter. These are the ones that you're going to want to attach the handles with to the bag. So take the black back plate off your handle, and you're going to want to line it up on your bag as close as you can to where your circle is drawn. There might be a little bit of overhang depending on how your fabric was cut. And then you're going to take your pen and you're going to mark your screw holes. Okay. Once you have your screw holes marked, you're going to come through and punch them out with your leather punch, or however you like to punch your holes. Again, I am using the larger hole punch, the 3.5 millimeter setting on my leather punch here, because the same thing with the handles as for the strap connectors, the screw setting needs to sit down into the fabric of the bag to get a nice tight fit. So you want your holes to be maybe a little bit bigger than you're used to punching them. I'm going to go through and grab out the bottom of those. I didn't want to get that last layer. Okay. All right, once you have your holes punched, take your handle, and I'm upside down for you guys. The flat portion of the handle is going to go at the top of your bag. And again, let's see if I can do this so you can see. And your bag will just fit down into the handle. And you want to push it so the screw settings come through. As well as you can. And just tuck all your edges in. Put your plate on. And go ahead and get your screws I like to screw them loosely in as I go around, just in case there's any shifting that needs to occur. And then once I have all the screws in, I go back, and I go back and tighten them. Sorry, I was out of focus there. Oop. I'll grab that one in a second. There it is. All right, so now that I have all the screws in, I'm going to go back and I'm going to tighten everything down nicely so I have a nice snug fit on my handles without any gaps. Make sure you don't over tighten because you don't want to strip your screw, but get it nice and tight so that there's not a gap in your handle. Okay, let me zoom back out. And there we go. There's our first handle on. We're going to do the same thing on this other side. Okay, our final step is to attach our chain strap to our strap connectors. And there we have it. The Juliet handbag is finished. I hope you enjoyed making this. It's a very elegant bag with these handles. That's really what makes the bag. If you make one of these, please share it on social media and tag me either with hashtag Cork and Thread Patterns or with hashtag Juliet Handbag. I hope you enjoyed this, and thanks for joining me today.